This will be a tutorial on how to create the cable connector that goes from the original Xbox to the XOSVP. So as you can see here, we got one VGA cable, the actual connector itself for the Xbox, the AVIP connector, the AVIP shielding, second half of the shielding, and the plastic shroud. So let's get started. Now, the way I start these things, and the very first thing you want to do before you start anything, just like with heat shrink tubing, you want to get the shroud on. You'll find that the hole is a little bit too small, and that's okay. It's designed this way. This is so it gets a nice friction fit, helps protect your cable. So how do we get it on? Well, the easiest way I find is just get some regular old parchment paper. It's nice, low friction, nice and thin. So what you want to do is you want to wrap it around the VGA cable. There you go. You want to twist off the end just to get it nice and tight. Shove that in the back here. And you'll find now that this is here, just a little bit of pressure, it'll just start sliding on. And because there's no friction, just kind of give it a twist and push. Once it's on, the next thing you want to make sure is top is facing top. So see the square on the VGA connector? That's the top. You get the XOSVP you put together yesterday, or earlier. You can see it plugs in just like that. So you want to make sure is that the plug on the Xbox side also faces the top. So it's pretty easy to match. You got the little square on this side, and you have the dimple there. Just something to keep in mind. You have it upside down. Not going to break anything. It's just not going to be as nice to plug in. So you can see now that I have all this parchment paper on, this thing is be able to push all the way back to the ferrite here. At this point, feel free to take some of the parchment paper out. It's just going to get in your way. So next thing you want to do is you want to strip away the rubber coating. Now where you want to strip it really matters how far this goes in. So as you can see around here, this is generally how you're going to connect it, because this connector will sit kind of flush in here, and you want a little bit of give on your wires just so you can kind of arrange them and sort them out easily. So I like to kind of cut just about here, so just a little bit after the shroud. Yeah, something like that. So I'm going to mark it here. So I got my X-Acto knife, hobby knife, whatever you want to call it. Make a little incision. You don't want to cut all the way because there is wires in there that you don't want to nick, especially the shielding. So that's pretty good. So you can start seeing the aluminum shielding right in there. Next thing you want to do is cut right down the middle. Just like that. Cool. And what I'll let you do is get a little split, pull it all the way open. There's your exposed wire. So the way this thing's organized is you have the outer shielding here. This is aluminum. You're not going to be able to solder the aluminum. What you want to do is you want to kind of take the weave, bend it backwards just to get it out of your way. You can try to keep the shape. At this point it doesn't matter too much. Now this piece here is very important. It's the copper drain. And this is what you'll actually be soldering on to the outer shield, just to help improve the connection. The inside wires are surrounded with foil. This is non-conductive foil. It's coated on the inside just to prevent any nicks on the internal wires from shorting out to ground. You just want to fold that back. Try your best not to rip it. And now you have the exposed internal wires. So, there are certain colors you want to keep. For sure, you want the red, green, and blue. These will carry your video signals. You can see they're doubly shielded. They have extra shielding around in the center, and the actual video conductor right down the middle. This helps ensure your video comes through nice and clean. So, the next thing you want to do is you want to strip the wires, because we're going to have to do some continuity testing. So you're going to want a pair of wire strippers. You can do this by hand with an X-Acto knife. It's a lot easier to do it with these. There's also automatic ones which work pretty well. What you want to do is just take enough off so that you can properly test the continuity. So in the VGA cable, we need to figure out which of these wires go to which pin. The red, green, and blue ones, always the same. They always carry the video signal, same order, which is great. I find sometimes though these can change on a per cable basis. Generally they're pretty consistent, but it doesn't hurt to check, just so that you don't end up screwing yourself over with the build. So the best way to do this is plug it in to your finished breadboard, and we're going to test some of the wires to see which one goes where. The best way to do that is with your continuity tester and your multimeter. The first thing we're going to do is the voltage line. So the voltage line is carried through here, touches this capacitor, touches that capacitor, touches that pin on this connector, on this filter right here. All we have to do is get our meter, get your continuity tester, make sure it beeps, check the pin you want to check. So right now I'm checking the 5-volt line, and run it on the wires you found out earlier and see which one connects to what you're trying to connect to. Okay, so in this cable, 5-volt line is the orange wire. So 5-volt is orange. Cool. Okay, so the next one, you want ground. Ground's pretty easy. It's pretty much all of these holes on the board are ground, so you can hold it in any one of them. Just start feeling around which one is connected to the ground. So my case is more than one, and you'll find that on yours as well, is you'll have more than one, and that's because there's multiple pins here, all connected to ground, and that's perfectly fine. What you want to do is just select one of them. The purple wire leads to ground, so I will put that down. So the next one you want to check is optical. Flip your board over, you can see the optical line kind of coming through these via fences and into this connector right here. So I'm going to plug it into there, and again, continuity test, fan out, perfect. So in my case, the blue wire, not the video blue, but this blue wire here, is the optical video, or the optical data signal. So I'll write that down. So once you know which wires you want to actually use, what you want to do is trim off the wires you're not going to use. So I know I want to keep blue, orange, and purple. So I'm going to pull these wires aside. Now before you cut them all, it doesn't hurt, double check with your continuity testers and just make sure everything's working as expected. And now what we want to do, cut off these extra video cable, or these extra data lines. Not going to need them, they're just going to get in the way, so you can just chop them right off like so. Done. So we have these. Best thing you can do now is just take the ends, give them a twist. Good, those are nice and twisted. So now these fellas. So these have 2 layers of shielding. So you want to do is remove the outer layer first. So I find the best, at least on my pair, 14 AWG. Plop it in there. Give it a decent amount of space to work with, and you pull it right off. Do that with the other wires. What you do at this point is you want to kind of fan out these copper conductors. Awesome, that looks good. So, final thing you're going to strip is these center conductors. Now these ones are pretty small, so I tend to find using 30 AWG works best, which is the smallest setting on this thing. So you just take it in and pull the conductor away from the shroud. And you don't want too much here, because when you're soldering this to this, this wire is going to get very close, and the more plastic you have here, the more leeway you have with the soldering, the easier it's just going to be. Get the green one. Looks good. And again, just give the tips a bit of a twist. This one might be tough to do without a pair of pliers like this, but it is doable. Looking solid. So, now that these are all twisted, stripped, and ready to go, the next thing you want to do is tin them. The reason why you want to tin them is it just makes the soldering job a lot easier, but it also keeps these bundles from unraveling, which is also very useful. There you go. And I find the easiest way to do this, honestly, just leave it on your stand like this. If you have a stand, or if you got third hands or whatever, you can use that too. But I find this works the best for me. You just keep the iron stationary, and you bring in each of the tips. So, cable's now prepped, ready for soldering. So next thing you're going to do is take this connector right here. There's different pins you're going to need to solder to on each side. This side's the top. You can tell it's the top because it's the shorter bit of plastic. You can see it's much shorter here, or it's much longer over here. So this is the top, and we'll start by soldering the pins on the top. So, which pins do you want to solder? Fairly simple. Skip the bottom two, solder this one, skip another two, and then solder the rest of the pins on the way up. So I'm going to do that right now, nice and quick. You just want to pre-tin them, so when you bring the wires in, you don't need to have a third hand feeding in solder. So I'm going to start that now. There's one. So, 1, 2, solder that one. 1, 2, solder the rest. So I skip these two, and I continue soldering the rest of the pins. So now we're working on the bottom. Again, the bottom is the longer side. So what you want to do, skip the bottom two, solder the next two, skip one, solder the next two again, and then solder the very top one. Next thing we want to do is we want to short the pins that tell the Xbox what video mode we want to run in. Now, to make the shorting pins, you're going to need some spare wire. Lucky you, you just chopped off a whole bunch of wire. So you just have it laying around on your desk by now. So what you want to do is you want to take two of them. Take the longest two you have, a little easier to work with. This green and black one look good to me. So, you already trimmed one side. This side's already stripped. All you gotta do is get to the other side. Cool. So those are pre-tinned. Now let's solder them on. So what you want to do, looking at the top side, again the top side is the shorter end. You want to look at the balls that you soldered, and the very bottom one is where we'll start. So we'll do the bottom one, so you have one very small one here. You want to do, camera to focus. Okay, so you skip the bottom two, go up one, that one's soldered, you skip another two, and then there's these two which are soldered. Those are the ones we want to jump. So we'll start by introducing the wire to these two here. So the next thing you want to do, you flip it around. So now I'm facing the bottom side. My wires are still connected. You can see I have two blank, two soldered, two blank, and then see, this is why it helps to check the photo, because sometimes it's hard to tell which ones were soldered. So yeah, so two blank, two soldered, one blank, and then we have these two here which are soldered. And these two are the ones that I am going to solder to. Perfect. So, these are both connected now, they're nice and sturdy, and they short out these pins. So that tells the Xbox we're running with a Microsoft HD pack, which we basically are, because we're building it ourselves. Okay, now for the fun part. This is pre-tinned, this is pre-jumped, everything is pre-soldered. So all you need is a free hand and some heat. So the best ones to start with always are the video connectors, because they're the thickest, so they're going to be the hardest to kind of get where you want them to go. And this is the top of the connector, so you can see right here. So let's get that going. So the very top pin, we're not going to solder to. We're going to solder to this pin and this pin. And we're going to solder to it with the green and the blue. So what you want to do is you want to take your connector, kind of fold it so they're kind of following each other in parallel. And you're going to want to connect it just like this. And they're going to be very close together, so be doubly sure you don't short it. But it's easier to do than it looks. Center conductor first, done, and then the shielding. Shielding might need to be a bit patient with the iron, because it is like a big giant roll of copper. If things are getting a little too close, definitely helps to have a pair of tweezers. Those are now soldered into place. They're not going anywhere, but you can see the copper conductor on the blue is really close to the green one. Now we're going to permanently fix that later, but for now it helps to kind of just space them apart a bit. As long as there's an air gap, you'll be fine. As I said, we'll fill that in later with some hot glue. And this is just, there's nothing much you can do about it. One thing you could do is you can cut the green wire slightly shorter than the blue wire. Kind of limits the overlap there. Red conductor goes on the bottom, right underneath the green and the blue. So I'm going to bring it over here, hook it up like this. And it's going to go into those bottom two pre-soldered joints we have right there. So let me do that. So those are soldered into place. Now comes the easy part. These wires. Okay, so the way we're going to connect these three wires is depending on the notes that we took earlier. Now we still have two more joints left to solder. So the top one here, that's the ground. That's your DC return. So in my case, that's my purple wire. So I want to solder my purple wire here. And then the other wire, this one right here, this is optical. This pad right here. So the optical wire that I have is the blue optical ground, or not ground. So I got the blue optical wire, and I got the ground wire right here. This should be nice and easy. You just solder them into those places. Okay, now we have one last pin, which is purple, and this one is our 5 volt. Actually, no, I got that wrong. And this is why you should always double check. Now you can already see these wires are a little kind of buckling inwards. That's fine. You're more than welcome to bend these things. The only thing you should keep in mind is that when you are bending them, try to keep the profile low, because this still needs to fit into the shielding. So keeping the profile low is important, but width-wise, we have a lot of room to play with. Okay, good. So these are all soldered. Looking great. Next thing you want to do, give them a quick optical check, a visual inspection, just make sure nothing looks obviously bridged. If things are a little close, it helps to check with a conductivity tester. The one big thing that you will probably short, especially if it's your first time, are the shield connectors here. So just make sure there's an air gap there. It looks pretty good right now. Okay. So, are we done yet? No. Hard part's done. Now you just gotta finish it. So what I like to do to ensure that these things don't move around, like the welds are good, they're not gonna come apart, especially once we get the shielding and we crimp it on. But I just wanna, be 100% sure nothing bad's gonna happen. So this looks really good. I don't really need to check it with a continuity tester. I feel pretty confident in that. But if I were you, before doing the next step, just check all these pins, make sure they're not shorted, make sure they're connected properly. Shouldn't take too long, but this looks good to me. So the next step is to break out the glue gun. So I got the glue gun preheated, ready to go. You could use electrical tape, kind of cut it out to squares. I know some of the original Xbox cables are like developed that way. It does work, it's just very labor intensive, and glue gun, you know, it's nice and easy and quick. Pretty much everyone has a glue gun in their house if they ever had grade 6 arts and crafts or something. It's nice and easy. So what you want to do, again, be aware of the profile. That's really the only thing you got to be aware of, is just make sure you don't put so much on that it's going to be impossible to put into the shielding. But what you want is just a nice thin layer. You want to do the bottom, same thing. Run right down the middle between the red, green, and blue connectors, just to make sure when we flatten this thing during its installation, these don't share the shielding. If they do end up touching, it's not the end of the world. You're more than welcome to like share the shielding between all these video connectors. It's just not going to be as good. It's a short run, so like visually it might not make a difference. But if you're making this thing, you might as well do it 100% proper, right? It's not here to hold the connections. That's one thing to keep in mind, is like the connections themselves are strong. I'm not using hot glue as a crutch. It's just a nice, easy way to shield these pins. So, as this cools down, what we're going to do next is restore the shielding. There we go. So the foil's on. And what you want to do is you want to keep your copper, the orange wire, back, because you're not going to put the orange wire into the tin. Took that out, give it a bit of a twist just so it doesn't come unraveled on you. Now, this is really where the glue comes in handy, because you're going to have all these like fine aluminum strands kind of just going around everywhere. Chances of one of them touching a place it shouldn't, you know, it's non-zero, so the glue helps keep it kind of together. All set. Next piece, get your tin, get your 2 shielding pieces, and let's start installing. So the easiest way to do this is to just push the plastic in a bit with your hand. If it's tight, you might have put a little bit too much glue. Get your other half of the shielding. You can see that this connector is only really pushed halfway through. And the best way to figure out how deep it should go is you take this piece, it's got these 2 arms, and they push right on the sides here. So all you have to do is just kind of push with this to get the connector all the way in. And you want, there's like a little lip right here. You want the little lip to go under this top piece. It might take a little bit of work, and as you're doing this, keep an eye on the crimp area, because you don't want to be pinching any wires and breaking conductivity, right? So try to keep all the wires kind of sitting just in this little cup here. Bring this in, and there. So you can see, nice and flush, that tab is under this shield, and it's got 2 little clips here which will kind of like hold it in place for you, which is great. Now that's done, take this shielding connector, and you can see we have these lips here, and these are perfect for crimping. They are crimping tools. You can get away with any pair of pliers, especially for this. It's not like electrical crimp. If this fails, it doesn't really break any connectivity, so you don't have to be too particular about it. It's mostly just here to keep the shield from escaping. Yeah, just pinch that down. Don't do it too hard that you break the conductors inside. Just give it enough so opening it up again is not going to be easy. Great. So now that's done, you're going to need a lot of heat. There's a huge piece of metal here. This thing's, you know, a pretty thick strand of copper, and it goes all the way through this cable, and it touches all this shielding. So there's a lot of shielding here. So I like to set my iron kind of hot. Definitely much hotter than I usually work with. Usually around 400. You can probably get away with less, but I find 400 works the best. So what you want to do is we want to solder this onto here, but this is coated in aluminum or tin or something, so it makes soldering not super easy. So what you can do, take a pair of pliers or a screwdriver or something and just kind of scratch up the surface. great. That looks good. That just adds a bit of texture, which makes the soldering a little easier. Next thing you want to do, kind of just take the copper wire, try to run it along your crimp from earlier, get it in place, get some solder, bring in the iron. All you gotta do is just heat it up. Let it get a little hot before you bring in the lead. Great. Add enough to kind of coat it a bit, have it stick, and done. Looks good. So at this point, you're pretty much done. At this point, we're pretty much done. We know this works. Had it plugged in with the XOSVP. Everything's golden. So let's put the shroud back on. Should be pretty easy. You still have a bit of parchment paper in there, so it won't have a ton of friction. But the key is to hold on to the paper so that you're kind of pulling it out as you pull it down. And at some point, you're going to get all of the paper out, and you're going to hit the shield like this. So you don't want to put too much pressure on the shield. It's got that crimp there. It's pretty sturdy, but you don't want to overdo it. So what you want to do is as you push this down, make sure you're gripping on to the wire. Don't put any pressure on here. You can damage those precious solder joints you just spent all day making. Get some of that. Just going to get some of the parchment paper out. There we go. So I took out some of that. Pliers. Don't want to leave too much around here, just to make sure there's friction. And as you take the parchment paper out, you'll notice it's a lot harder to move. That's kind of the point. Just work with it. Get it around here. And you can see it's just going to barely fit over the shielding, just like that. And now it's hard to push this down further without pushing the shielding. So I find just put it flat against the table and push down. Just like that. Once it bottoms out, you got your finished connector. You got a small piece of pliers. You can kind of go around the outside, just get the last bit of the parchment paper. But really at this point, it's all connected enough. There's hooks on the middle for this plastic, so like it's not coming off. You're good to go. And yeah, that's how you make the cable.